Right, so this is a bit about AES67 and why AES67 has been a very, very useful standard and is still a very useful standard because it served as the nucleus of some of the other standards, you know, around this AoIP or the media over IP business. And I'm going to explain why and give you a bit of insight into why AES67 is the way and what's good about it. So, my name is Andreas Hildebrand. I'm working for ALC Networks out of Munich, and we are the guys who have defined the Ravenna audio over IP technology, which you can see just behind you. So AES67, what is the original goal of AES67? Well, to provide a method of interconnecting non-interoperable audio over IP solutions. So what ended AES67 up being? Well, it's an interoperability standard. It's important to understand it's not a solution on its own. It's there to facilitate interoperability among various existing solutions. So what was the problem? Well, very easy. We had several solutions like Dante, Ravenna, QLAN, just to name a few, LiveWire, WeetNet, and so on. They all based on IP as a protocol layer, but they weren't just able to interoperate on that layer, so you had to route audio lines in order to traverse from a Dante system into LiveWire or Ravenna or whatever. And so X192, that was the original task group, took up the task of defining an interoperability layer so that you could directly exchange signals on the IP layer without having to go back to analog or digital solutions. So when we started this, I say we because I was part of the task group defining AES67, we were looking at a typical audio over IP solution. Doesn't matter if it's Dante or Ravenna or whatever, and we could clearly identify some functional blocks like timing, transport, connection management, device control, and their individual ingredients. And these individual ingredients, or functional definitions, are actually the road to incompatibility with respect to why don't they interoperate with each other. And that is because if we look at the individual solutions, how they address these individual functional blocks with definitions, with protocols, you can clearly see if we're bringing up, or let's just say, for example, 4 of them, that there are always spots where one defines something which is not supported by the other. So we don't have a clear common, a common ground which is shared between all of these applications. So, and that's where AES67 intended to hop above, to say, okay, we need, for all of these functional blocks, we need a common definition of protocols, of functionality, which would then, if it's supported by these different solutions, would then facilitate direct interoperability on the IP layer, and that is basically what we came up with. And we made it, we defined it in a way that not any single existing solution had to change everything. So we were carefully looking at what is already in place and where can we define something which might require a slight change in one or the other application or solution. And then we had a good hope that AES67 would be adopted by the industry. And then raised the curtain on 11th September 2013, just 2 days before IBC happened in Amsterdam that year. The AES67 standard had been published after 3 years of work inside the task groups. And so again, the definitions we were setting forth in AES67 are based on these functional blocks. This is just another picture of the same stuff we had on the other slides. So we were coming up with a very constrained set of definitions in order to encourage, Dante, Ravenna, and the others to adopt these small constraints. And so clocking was based on PTP version 2. We concluded on 48 kilohertz as the only mandatory to be supported sampling frequency. Transport is using yet another standard protocol, RTP. We use quality of service to be able to prioritize audio traffic above any other traffic on the network. We defined L16 and L24. This is linear 16-bit, linear 24-bit as professional audio formats. So these need to be supported, as well as 1 to 8 channels per stream and 1 millisecond of packet time. SDP is being defined to be used for transporting the information about a particular stream originating from a sender to the receiver, so that the receiver knows how to decode the stream data. And for connection management, we stopped the whole definition, defining IGMP for multicast, yet another standard protocol actually, and ZIP, you know ZIP from voice telephony, ZIP for unicast connections. That's what AES67 actually is, and you can see it's a very constrained set of requirements, which we hope would be adopted by all the different audio IP solution providers, and we did not define anything for discovery, right? And at the early days, people said AES67 is broken. If I don't know what's on the network, how should I connect? Well, you know, do we consider these pieces of technology broken? Actually not, right? Because I can make a phone call, but only because you are sitting here and looking at me, I can't make the call. Why? Because I don't know your magic number. So you have to tell me your number or send it to me via email, or maybe I can even look it up in the yellow pages, I don't know. But once I have that number, I can dial it in. And that's exactly where AES67 is. The SDP information, that's the third block from the top. That is the magic number I need to actually make a connection. And that can be sent over, you know, copy and paste on a text file via email. It can be on an HTTP directory service whatsoever. So we stopped forcing people to adopt one of multiple available discovery schemes. That just as a background why we didn't define any discovery. So we had, following that release, we had Plugfest in Munich, in Washington, and engineers were gathering together, cables were plugged and run around the room, not very nice, but it worked. And we sent around lots of streams, 1 million of packets. And as an outcome of these Plugfest, we could see that what we had set forth in the standard actually works. So participants from LiveWire, from QSC, from Ravenna partners, they were all able to exchange streams and packets based on IP. That worked. So that was the outcome of it. Here's another few pictures from the Washington Plugfest. Yeah, so that was quite nice. Also getting to know each other. You know, previously LiveWire engineers and Dante engineers and Ravenna engineers were just like, oh no, this is something, you don't want to talk to them. But it's all people behind it. It's all knowledgeable and nice people behind, and so that was another very good experience. So, and the industry, of course, got attracted by AES67. That's what we wanted, and we saw the first alliance being inaugurated, industry alliance of manufacturers, of radio stations, of end users, under the hood of the MNA, the Media Networking Alliance. In 2014 inaugurated, and we had more than 25 members in 2017. And the activities were focused around marketing, educational support, well, I don't know, educational content, and providing developers with some sort of support when they wanted to implement AES67. We had public demonstrations right here on the show floor in 2015 and 2016 at ISE, and those who are visiting regularly may recall these setups where we really had all these disparate companies there, and connecting, and everything was actually playing nicely together. And recognizing a Yamaha console next to a Lavo console, that's some sort of interesting stuff which was actually going on, right? So, not long after that, another alliance appeared on the scene, which was also addressing sort of IP media solution, and it was AIMS, the Alliance for IP Media Solutions. And consequently, since MNA was, touching on the very same thing, just limited to audio, they actually merged. So MNA merged over to AIMS. So what is AIMS? AIMS, well, we are all on the AIMS presentation theory here. It's a non-profit trade alliance. It's open to all. You're invited to join if you like, funded by the members, and has just one common goal. And the common goal is to foster the adoption of IP-based or standard-based interoperability over IP for media, broadcast, entertainment, and pro-AV industry. That's the common goal. And there are quite a lot of member companies, as well as radio stations, consulting companies, as part of AIMS. AIMS has set forth a roadmap Well, everything over IP, media over IP, is of interest, and the first standard actually which deals with media over IP is SMPTE 2022-6, which is an encapsulated SDI signal, so video, audio, ancillary data, all as it's contained in SDI, encapsulated in IP packets, and that could be transported across a network. So that was the first one which had been adopted on the roadmap. Of course, AES67 was just a very logical next step for the audio transport over IP, and then also video come into game with SMPTE ST 2110. So AIMS adopted 2110, and marketing efforts and everything centered around the business of AIMS were also including 2110, and then there were also more stuff which has been set forth by more broadcasting related organizations like the Joint Task Force on Network Media. They also ended up on the AIMS roadmap because they are usually required to build complete systems. Now, speaking of video, SMPTE 2110. What is 2110? Well, short story is it's absolutely the same thing as AES67, just also for video. So typically in a video production facility you have video and audio signals, and so 2110 is the same thing as AES67 just for video, including audio of course. So if we compare those two existing standards like SMPTE 22 and 2110 with each other, we can say 2022 is the bundled approach, so it's one readily produced signal, an SDI signal transported across an IP network, versus 2110 is the essence-based approach where we transport video and audio and the related ancillary data as individual streams on the network. Why would we do that? Well, we want to do this because if we are looking at a typical production environment, SMPTE 2022-6 is not very suitable, because if we take the example of an audio mixing desk or processor, whatever, in order to access the audio, it will have to get in the whole SDI encapsulated IP stream with all the video in place. But it's not interested in the video, so it has to embed the audio data, process the audio data, and then embed the newly generated audio stream into the SDI stream and in the IP stream again. That's not very practical for a production environment, right? For a live production stage or whatever. And that's where 2110 has its benefit, because now all the essence streams are individually available on the network. So the audio processing device only has to register for the audio signal, and it's not even caring about video and any other data. It's just processing audio and putting back a newly processed audio stream onto the network, which is then accessible by other devices. So that's the advantage of having essence-based media streams on a network. So what does 2110 actually comprise of? It's a suite of standards which has definitions for system timing in general, functionality in place. It has documents which talk about how to transport video in compressed and uncompressed format, high bandwidth video from slow-mo cameras, and so on. It also has, of course, documents touching on audio, and we will learn in a second that it's basically AES67, SDI ancillary data, time text, and there's much more still in the making. So if you watch 2110, there will be more documents coming out which are useful for live production in broadcast environment. Looking at the ingredients, I'll make that a short one. We have synchronization and alignment, of course. Short story, it's based on PTP, and thus it's using the same mechanism as AES67, right? Transport, short story, it's using real-time transport protocol, thus it's using the same stuff as AES67 was already using. Next one, signalization, is again based on the very same stuff as AES67, it's SDP, the Session Description Protocol, so everything in place with AES67 has been reused or redefined to be used by SMPTE 2110. So they are not that very far apart, and even for the audio side of things, SMPTE went the easy way, and they just said, oh, well, okay, there is audio, there's AES67, we just adopt it straight away. So basically, the -30 document is the same as AES67. It says constraints here. Don't worry about those constraints. They aren't really constraints, because some of the things defined in -30 reach a bit further than this small limited interoperability set of AES67. But the only mandatory requirements are fully covered by AES67. So any AES67 device is fully compliant with 2110, so can play nicely in a 2110 environment. I don't want to go into details about this. And just as an illustration, we have AES67 mandatory requirements on the left, and then it's exactly where the 2110-30 level A mandatory requirements are situated. And some of the other conformance levels in SMPTE 2110 are also covered by AES67 optional stuff. If you're interested in learning more about how AES67 actually relates to 2110, there's a nice document, a white paper on the AIMS website, download for free, and you can read all about it. And just as a side note, because I'm wearing this green jacket, right, Ravenna covers this all. So Ravenna is fully compliant with any of the definitions in 2110. Now, AES67 was about linear PCM audio, right? 24-bit, 16-bit, linear PCM audio. But SMPTE, coming from the broadcast production environment, knew they need something for AES3 audio. Everyone knows what AES3 audio is, right? It's the metadata stuff which goes with the linear PCM data. So they were looking, okay, how can we then transport AES3? It's not covered by AES67, so we need to define another document for it, -31. And that's the point where, you know, I was also part of the 2110 standardization team. I said, guys, hold on a second. There is already something existing out there. That's Ravenna's AM824 format definition, which actually covers AES3. And so we're looking at this. We're asking just, you know, is it used somewhere? And well, of course it's used, because, you know, companies like Lavo, Direct Out, and others, in Madi and whatever, they need to transport AES3. So we had it, and what they just did, they just adopted our Ravenna AM824 format specification into the -31 document. And so again, Ravenna is on that aspect also fully compliant with 2110. Even the concept of the link offset, which defines the way the time actually samples are playing out at a receiver side, so in order to reach a determinable fixed link offset or playout time, even that concept was directly adopted by 2110. They just called it link offset delay instead link offset. It's the same picture, it's the same math behind it. So all this is all the same 2110 AES67. So let's quickly look at the ingredients map to understand how AES67 played a very, very vital role in the 2110 standardization. AES67 relies on the RTP transport definition. It uses PTP version 2 with a specific media profile. It's based on UDP IP as the underlying transport mechanisms. It is using the SDP standard from IETF, those are RSE4566. And then SMPTE came along. SMPTE was built on technical recommendations being set forth by VSF, Video Services Forum. But if you look at the ingredients map, well, of course, video had been added to the game based on an IETF standard. Then audio was directly related back to AES67. Then SDI ancillary data needed to be there as an stream. Yet another IETF standard there. And then, of course, SMPTE PTP version 2 with a different profile, but it was just part of the game as within AES67, and even SDP was directly adopted into 2110. So at the end, we ended up everything which had been defined in 2110, except for video and ancillary data, has already been in place in AES67. So AES67 really is the nucleus of 2110. That shows the importance of AES67, and if we look at devices out there supporting AES67 and 2110, we can see that by now we have some 3,500 devices actually running AES67, most of them being Dante devices supporting the AES67 mode. And if we look by the various protocols, you can see an impressive number of AES67 enabled devices being out there. So AES67 really is also a success story, now being supported basically by all standards and AoIP solutions. So there was all transport and synchronization, but we need more for a working system, do we? Right, of course. And it's discovering resources, establishing connection, All of that had been covered by the individual AoIP solutions like Ravenna, Dante, etc. And it's just not covered for reasons I gave you earlier by AES67 and 2110. So, luckily enough, another standard organization comes into game. It's the AMWA, the Advanced Media Workflow Organization, with their NMOS specifications. NMOS is networked media open specifications, which is basically a set of specifications sitting on top, functionally on top of AES67 or 2110, building up, stacking up to build complete systems. So that's how it looks like. I call it stacking up. We have AES67, 2110 with the typical ingredients, and then AMWA and NMOS specifications come into game, built on top of that to be able to provide fully functional systems at the end. So, not going into detail of these specifications, but they are all used in working, to build working systems. It's just another picture here. We have the transport and synchronization layer, and then we have the functional layer, building control and management functionalities with the NMOS specifications. So, even NMOS was tailored to work with AES67 through 2110. Now, that's broadcast, right? So broadcast is based on AMWA, AES67, 2110. What about the other side of audio, Pro AV? Right, broadcast is one thing, now we're looking into Pro AV. Is anything of that existing or applicable to Pro AV? Well, that was the question AIMS also asked itself. And so they came up with a new specification, the IPMX, IP Media Experience specification, which is a not so new anymore initiative of AIMS here at the booth. So what is AIMS? What is IPMX? It's basically what is already existing for broadcast, plus more specifications and functionality typically required in Pro AV systems, like HTCP, CC, edit data, USB functionality, even compressed data formats. They are all required, and that all comes together in the IPMX definitions. So, what is IPMX? Basically, just the same derived from the definition of AIMS, from the working baseline of AIMS. It's a set of definitions for protocols, functionality to foster interoperability on IP for the Pro AV world. And so basically, IPMX builds on everything I've explained up to now, NMOS, 2110, AES67, but adds further definitions and functionalities to match the requirements of typical Pro AV, reaching from the very smallest application, just feeding an HDMI signal into an IP system and having a display on the other side where that signal is being just displayed, all the way up to large entertainment parks and everything. All this is what IPMX is looking at, but trying to simplify the relatively complex way 2110 and AES67 are working through some sort of enhancement and constraints they are setting forth. I usually hand over to Sam Resign at this point where he can explain more about ITMX. Just to let you know, there's yet another industry organization, the Video Services Forum, which does the technical work on the IPMX standardization. They have set out 10 documents by now, which describe how IPMX works, how it builds on 2110, and how it enhances the principles. And then again, NMOS, AMWA, NMOS comes into game. They care about all these other functionalities like edit, HTCP, and these kind of things. So they all work together hand in hand. And again, if you want to learn more about IPMX, they have a nice website, ipmx.io, where you can learn more. All right, so turning back to AES67 to conclude the full picture, to close the bracket, and to release you from this presentation. Let's have a quick look at AES67 maintenance. We had the initial publication in 2013, so that's 10 years from now. We had a celebration, reception yesterday. We had a first revision 2 years later, where we were just doing some clarification, removing some ambiguous wording and blah blah blah. Then in 2016, we addressed the topic of PTP profiles, because there's a default profile, the AES67 media PTP profile, the SMPTE 2059, that's the 2110 profile for PTP. And so we, in that report, we published what is the common set of operating parameters for all of these profiles, so that you don't have to run multiple profiles on your network if you want to run AES67 and 2110 in parallel, right? So you can settle on one common profile, and that is described in that publicly available report. 2018, we had the second revision introducing PIX to AES67. Well, not these animals here. PIX is a protocol implementation conformance specifications. So hands up, who knows what a PIX actually is or looks like? You should know. Come on. Well, this is what a PIX looks like. Basically, it's taking every sentence in the standard document. Standard documents are sometimes really hard to read. So it's taking every sentence in the document, every single requirement or optional feature, and lays it out in an, in this case it's an Excel sheet, but it lays it out requirement by requirement by requirement by requirement, or option by option by option, and then manufacturers can go ahead and tag, oh, is that requirement supported by my implementation? Oh, that is not. So they can self-check if their implementation really is compliant with AES67. And that's nothing we invented. PIX is a standard mechanism to self-certify and verify that a particular implementation is working along the lines of a standard. And 2110, by the way, is doing the very same thing right now. So you'll see a PIX published for 2110. So even there, they are building on what AES67 has already done. So, and then further clarification, and most important, with all these revisions, we never ever broke anything in AES67. We neither added stuff which would possibly broke the backward compatibility. So since 2013, this standard is standing, added clarification, added PIX and stuff, but we didn't change anything to not break the original standard and risk any backward incompatibilities. Are we done with AES67? No, of course not. We are still working on something. In 2020, we released an how do you use AES67 over WAN, wide area networks? Because, well, AES67 was targeting at high performance, low latency applications in local area networks for the interoperability set. But some people were keen of working with AES67 even over wide area network lines, so we published a report which discusses the challenges and possible solutions to actually run AES67 also on wide area networks, even including cloud, which is very popular these days. So if you're interested in that kind of application, just go ahead, download that report from the AES website. Very interesting because it also included project examples from very large broadcasting companies, BBC, CBC, etc. Are we done with AES67 now? No, we are not. We are still working on it. Why are we working on it? Because we have, so many new aspects, and ST2110 is there, and we saw some differences. And so what we are actually doing is we are close for publishing a third revision of AES67. We removed one of the real requirements we had in place, and that was SIP. So we discovered throughout the time AES67 is there that very, very few devices, when using unicast, are also supporting SIP. And we found it, okay, it's a burden, it doesn't make sense to have it as a requirement, so we changed it from a requirement into a recommendation. So that means that SIP is not required anymore, but unicast still needs to be supported, of course. Then we looked at some things which were a little bit different or different wording in 2110, so we changed a few things for homologation purposes with ST2110, because people are always like, oh, AES67 this is, 2110 this is written differently here, and basically it was always the same. But as standardizations are, oh no, I can't just copy text over from there, I have to write my own text, right? But it says at the end the same thing, but with different words, people are confused. So we changed some text as well, but without changing the actual content and requirements there. So for people to better understand both standards, actually. We added some notes on how the new release of the PTP standard is being handled. So if PTP version 2.1 is present on your system, we added some notes how your system or implementation should deal with that. We improved the PIX statement. We made an even better or fatter PIX, I don't know. And we restructured the document for the same reasons I mentioned earlier. And we had some language alignment. Some people were very sensitive to the terms master and slave role or device, which has been defined by the PTP standard, IEEE 1588. They use those words, grandmaster, master, slave, and apparently some people find these terms very offensive. So SMPTE 2110 went ahead and changed them to leader and follower. Well, that might sound not so sensitive anymore for guys living here in the US, but if you're living in Europe, leader in particular is a very sensitive term. So IEEE 1588, the standardization organization of 1588, went ahead and they came up with, okay, if you find master and slave to be too offensive or too sensitive, use time transmitter and time receiver instead. And that's actually what they are. Master and slave are a time transmitter or a time receiver. So that's what we added to AES67 as well. And we kept, guess what, the full backward compatibility, except that we don't require SIP anymore, right? Okay, and when we will have that standard published, hey, we hope to finish this year. We are very close to the end. It might get 2024 before it's being published, but we will finish the work this year, and you will see a third revision of AES67 showing up. Further works, let's skip over that, just to give you another glimpse of why AES67 is important. And to sum up at the end, yes, Martin, you're next. You can shorten down your presentation. AES67, a success story, the nucleus of multiple emerging standards. It's supported by basically all of the existing AoIP solutions to date. It is the nucleus of ST2110, as we have just learned, and IPMX. It receives additional attention by by other standardization organizations like the AMBAR or the Video Services Forum. It has been taken up by the Media Networking Alliance and the AIMS Alliance, and it's even part of what EBU and the Joint Task Force on Network Media have set forth as recommendation how to actually build real working systems based on these standards. So AES67 is there, it's very important, it's very successful, and it won't go away, just believe me. And yeah, 10 years of AES67, and in 10 years I hope that we can celebrate 20 years of AES67 here. Thank you all for your attention.